Good morning, everybody. Actually, this morning's discussion, the idea for it came from one of our participants, Dr. Howard Salop, who occasionally joins us from Maryland, one of my oldest and dearest friends. We lived across the street from each other, and we used to walk to school in the morning together. I couldn't tell you what we talked about on all those walks back and forth from school for many, many, many years. But I remember one particular morning, he was so excited because the day before they had studied the Aseres Adibros, the so-called 10 Commandments, and he found out that there were many more than 10 in that listing. And he was all excited, and he went through all the Mefarshim, and that discussion, well over 60 years ago, I still remember. And that's the genesis of our discussion this morning. We read this past Shabbos. We all stood up in shul. We heard the 10 utterances, because nowhere in the Torah are these 10 statements referred to as the 10 commandments. They are Aseret HaDvarim. There are 10 statements, 10 utterances that Hashem made, which were translated, I guess, to 10 commandments. And by the way, we can have a whole separate discussion about the tablets, the luchos. Are they curved on top or are they square? That's a whole separate discussion all by itself. Just be aware that the giving of the Torah on Har Sinai was not the way it was depicted by Cecil B. DeMille in that movie, or those that came before him. But it was quite an unusual event. The whole world was aware of it. In any event, what's important for our discussion this morning is to understand that those 10 utterances, those 10 statements that framed, I guess, the event at Mount Sinai when God appeared to the Jewish people, in actuality, the Mefarshim all agree that in terms of mitzvos, there are anywhere from 10 to 14 mitzvos in the so-called 10 commandments. And we will go through some of them. But it's important to be aware that it's not as simple as many people would have it be. It's become, the 10 Commandments, a big political issue now, and people have them over their Oren Kodesh, and it's a very important part of synagogue architecture. But what the luchos were, how they were made, is a whole separate discussion in the Medrash. I'm going to start with the Sefer HaChinuch. The Sefer HaChinuch lists 14 mitzvos within those 10 statements. The first thing is to know, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, to know that there is a God. That in itself is a mitzvah. To know that that there is a God. And then, of course, not to entertain thoughts about other gods, not to make an idol for yourself is a separate mitzvah, then not to worship idols. And also not to worship idols in the same way that God is worshipped. These are all separate mitzvahs, and he goes into great detail explaining each of these separate items. Of course, not taking God's name in vain. The sanctity of Shabbos, and there are some who divide that into two separate things. We'll talk about that. There's Kedusha Shabbos, and there's the Isur Malacha of Shabbos. These are all separate mitzvos. And then, of course, honoring your mother and your father, which are extended to older siblings as well. Not to murder is important. The mitzvah is not thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not murder. You're allowed to kill under certain circumstances. If you're in war, if somebody sneaks up on you and tries to rob your house, you're allowed to kill, but you can't murder. There's a big difference. Of course, adultery and not to kidnap. Where is not to kidnap in the 10 Commandments? It's part of not to steal. Lo tignov refers to kidnapping. according to most Mefarshim, not to testify falsely, and not to be jealous or to scheme to acquire somebody else's possessions. Now, there's a whole separate limud we could do about the differences between the 10 commandments as they're listed in Shmos, and they're repeated again in the Eschanan, slightly different. We just read last Shabbos, Zochor is Yom HaShabbos L'Kadsha. And that refers to Kiddush and Avdallah. In the Eschanan, it says Shamor. That refers to the Isur Malacha. There's minor differences, but the Chinuch lists 14 mitzvos out of those 10 statements. Other Rishonim list 12 or 13, but knowing that there's a God, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, most people you would ask don't consider that a mitzvah. Anochi Hashem Elokecha, what kind of mitzvah? To know that there is a God, that is a mitzvah. Everybody agrees on that. Not to covet the house, your neighbor's wife. These are, according to some Rishonim, separate mitzvahs. Not to be jealous in general. This would be the overarching category. But you specify neighbor's house, neighbor's wife, whether it belongs to him. Some people break it up into separate mitzvos. But basically, again, it's considered one mitzvah. Okay. The Ibn Ezra's commentary on the 10 utterances, Aseret HaDibros, very, very verbose. Very, very verbose. But he makes some interesting comments. He says, the Torah has a pattern. It starts with a commandment directed at the brain and the heart. Believe in Hashem. No idols. That's consciousness. Then it moves to speech. Don't take Hashem's name in vain. And what is that? By the way, but what's the practical implication of not taking Hashem's name in vain? People who use God's name when something's happened that's bad, or as a curse word, it's an important mitzvah not to use God's name in vain. God's name is used during tefillah. That's about it. You don't take God's name in any other context. So we talk about speech. We talk about action. Shabbos, honoring parents. These are active mitzvos. And then we talk about the first five. If you look at the first five, brain and heart, that's believing in Hashem and not worshiping idols. Speech, not taking Hashem's name in vain. And then action, Shabbos and parents. That's the order of the first five. The second five is the exact opposite. Don't murder, followed by speech. Don't swear falsely, following by thought. Don't covet, don't desire that which is not yours. So the Torah is talking about the entire sphere of human activity. And we have to basically control ourselves both in our speech and in our action. That's the Ibn Ezra's approach towards this. The Abravanel also lists more than 10. He also lists 14 as well as the Chinuch. And he says there are 4 separate commandments within the second commandment concerning idolatry, in terms of worshiping other types of gods. And there are 10, I guess, subjects of mitzvos, he called it. I don't know how you translate that. And it's interesting that there are Rishonim, the Saadia Gaon is particular, but there are people who learn all 613 mitzvos from the 10 commandments. And they'll take those 10 and I'm not going to go through the whole list with you now, but take my word for it. All the 613 mitzvos in the Torah can somehow be related to those 10 or 14 mitzvos in the Aseret HaDibros. Initially, because of that, because the entire Torah is encapsulated in those 10 utterances. Originally, fascinating, the 10 Commandments was part of Shacharis in the morning. You'll notice, by the way, in some Sidurim, after the Shir Shel Yom, you have the Aseres, you have the Adimamins and the Aseres Adibros. Okay? Originally, the Aseres Adibros was part of the Shacharis service until the Judeo-Christians, when Christianity first started, they would say, well, these are the only important things you have to believe in, just those 10 Commandments. So the rabbis took that out of davening. But historically, that's where it came from. They're important, but they pulled it out of Shacharis, again, which is why many Rishonim connect all 613 to those first 10 or 12, 13, or 14. Okay. Another interesting observation that you have to think about when you read the 10 Commandments. The first commandment, Anochi Hashem Elokecha asher hotzeisicha m'eretz Mitzrayim b'beis avodim. I am the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt from bondage. That's a very strange way to introduce himself to the Jewish people. Why didn't God say, I am the Lord your God who created the universe? Why only I took you, Jewish people, out of Egypt, out of bondage? I'm not just the God of the Jewish people, I'm the God of the entire universe. Why doesn't it say, I created the world? Why does it specify taking the Jews out of Egypt? So, according to some Mefarshim, basically, he made it clear that the mitzvahs of the Torah are specifically designated for Jews. Non-Jews have the Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach. They have the 7 Noachide laws of basic morality. A non-Jew could observe other mitzvahs, except Shabbos and Bris Milah, as a mitzvah, because these are designated as from the word ot, a symbol specifically for Jews. But these 2 mitzvahs define this relationship between us. But the Yitzias Mitzrayim, we're no longer slaves to Pharaoh. We became slaves to Hashem. And apparently the Torah was given to the Jewish people specifically and not for everybody else. And that's an important distinction to make. That's why God says, I took you out of Egypt, not I created the world. Yeah.
Yesterday also, Rabbi, you equated, right, believing God to learning and keeping the Torah. He put them like in the same.
Okay.
Well, isn't one of the Aseres Adibros then, right? Learn Torah. That would encompass a lot. You know, he said, respect your parents. Do this. Learn Torah. If it's equating to God, I would think that should be up there in the 10.
Okay, again, that's part of understanding there is God through mitzvos. So that's included. If you look at the Saadia Gaon's compilation of learning all 613 from those 10, Talmud Torah is included in the first one. I am the Lord your God. Well, how do you know that? It's important to understand it, and the only way you understand Hashem is by studying his Torah. But it's a good point. Okay. Talking about God's name and the 10 Commandments and so forth, why is God's name only mentioned in the first 5 of the 10 Commandments? If you look at the wording, God's name is only mentioned in the first half. Those mitzvahs between man and Hashem. His name is not mentioned in the second half. Don't do this, don't do that. Doesn't mention God's name. Again, Ben Adam Lachaver, Ben Adam Lamakom. The last 5 commandments between man and man are basically, I guess, basic laws of morality. And these are things that we should have become able to understand on our own. You don't take something that doesn't belong to you. You don't take a life because you didn't create life. You don't desire something that doesn't belong to you. These are common sense, if you will, type of things. And the Chayyim writes that all mitzvahs between man and man are actually more important because they also come from Hashem. So all mitzvahs are also between man and Hashem. That doesn't really answer the question why Hashem's name is not mentioned in the last five. So I don't have a good answer to that question. I mean, the first five, yes, that's between man and Hashem, but the last five also ultimately from God, obviously, but Hashem's name is not mentioned in in the second half.
Wally,
Yeah.
I think the last five will apply to everybody, not just Jews.
Well, but that goes back to the observation we made earlier that when Hashem begins, he says, "I am the Lord your God who took you out of Mitzrayim." That is specifically talking to the Jewish people. He's not talking to the world. The world has adopted it as a universal set of moral codes. But it's interesting. The world, the second half, the world accepts. The first half, not so.
But the ones that apply to Jews, it mentions Hashem because he's our God.
Okay.
But the ones for everybody, it's not necessary to mention his name.
Okay. I can accept that. I can accept that.
Also, the last five don't murder. Well, it's not like you can murder the Kadosh Baruch Hu. So that's, and clearly all 10 are coming from Hashem, but, what are you going to covet the Kadosh Baruch Hu? I mean, maybe you wish you had the ability to do X, Y, and Z, but they're really clearly between Ben Adam LaAdam, as it's always divided that way. And, it's a given. It's like a t-shirt that some parents have. I think, what is it? Do what I say because I said so or something, so it's coming from Hashem. We know that for the last five.
Okay. These are all very, valid points. And there's a lot to talk about here. And a lot of questions that come up. The fascinating question, Mechilta raises this, what does the prohibition against, how is stealing connected to, if you put a parallel between the first half and the second half, the first five, how is stealing compared to swearing falsely? Lo tignov, aside from the interpretation of meaning kidnapping as well, but how is stealing connected to swearing falsely? There's a connection there somehow. Anybody can figure out what that connection is? Because very often, this is pointed out by the Mechilta, that if you steal, you might lie or swear falsely to cover up your stealing. So there's a connection there as well. There's a great deal here to talk about. All I can suggest is that when you have a chance, it's worthwhile reading the 10 Commandments that we just read last Shabbos and comparing it to the version that is used in Eschanan, in Dvarim. For example, in Shmos it says, Lo sachmot, covet, be jealous of. In Dvarim it says, Lo tisave, don't desire. What's the difference between covet and desire? I mean, are the two aspects of the same commandment or two separate commandments? So one, it's a question of desiring to the point of doing something about it. I'm not sure that I understand the difference between it's two aspects of the same mitzvah. The Rambam counts them as two separate mitzvahs. Lo tesave is the desiring something, and lo sachmod means to actually covet it. I want to have $1 million. That's a desire. I want his $1 million, the $1 million that he has. I want to have the house that he's living in. That's coveting. Well, they're both machshavos, but it's slightly different. In other words, if you have this gorgeous mansion, so if I say I would like to have a mansion like that, versus saying I'd love to have a lovely house or better looking at, there's slightly different nuance. Yeah, I want to have his house. That's right. That's right. Okay. Again, it might be two aspects of the same mitzvah. Actually, and the Rambam of all the Rishonim, he somehow comes to 15 mitzvos in the Aseret HaDibros. So, yeah.
It's very hard to train yourself. My friend it's a beautiful car. And I take a look at it and I said, wow, I wish I could have a car like that too. You don't have to even say it. You're not supposed to even think it. But to train yourself,
Yeah, but people do that. So again, we are being encouraged to be sameach bechelko. I'm very happy that he has a lovely car. I'm happy for him.
It's easier said than done.
Oh, no one said it's easy. No one said it's easy, but this is the ideal. The ideal, Hashem gives everybody what is appropriate to them, whatever that means. Hashem, what's the expression in Yiddish? The Eibish viert the Welt. God rules everything. God runs the show. And if he decides this person should have a Mercedes, the other person should have a Volkswagen, that's just the way it is. And it's not easy, but you have to accept the fact that I'm a Volkswagen person and not a Cadillac person. You just have to accept that. That's not easy to do sometimes. And this is and the Balei Musar spent volumes on that subject. Yes.
Would you say that's the most difficult mitzvah to keep?
It's certainly one of the most difficult mitzvahs to keep, no question about it. Because what basically Hashem is telling us in the second half is to overcome your normal impulses. If I don't have something and I want to have it, but I can't afford it, so I may want to steal it. No, you can't do that. It's not yours. For whatever reason, it was decided that you shouldn't have that. You want to overcome. Somebody has this gorgeous wife. I wish she were my wife. Now, I'm not going to go and steal her from her husband. That would be an overt act, but even thinking about it is prohibited. That's hard. To control your emotions is very difficult to do, and that's what the second half of the 10 Commandments is trying to do. Or the 15 or the 14, whoever you want to count them.
Wally,
yeah.
There's a saying in Yiddish, of mir gesucht,
Yeah,
which
it should
goes
only be
against
from,
that.
right.
Yeah, there are a lot of these expressions deal with the fact that human emotions are very difficult to legislate. People feel what they feel. It's very hard to legislate how you feel or how you think. And people resist that. And this is what the Torah is telling us to do. Not only in those 10 utterances, but in all the Taryag mitzvos, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling you, I want you to overcome your basic impulses to do X, Y, and Z, because this is how I want to raise you to your highest potential as a human being. That's the purpose of mitzvos, to raise you to your highest potential. And at highest potential means that I'll be satisfied with what I have, because that was God's will, for whatever reason. And I shouldn't want what someone else has. I shouldn't desire, and these are very difficult things. And that's why the Balei Musar emphasized tremendously in very long chapters on overcoming. Basically, the Balei Musar make you work on yourself. How can I be a better person? How can I overcome certain desires that I have? And you have to work. It's not natural. It's natural to want something that someone else might have. You have to overcome that, and this is a lifetime's work. They tell I'll end with this humorous story. They talk about, there are certain yeshivos that were known as Musar yeshivos, where they learned Gemara and everything else, but they emphasized Musar. They studied ethical texts. They worked on perfecting their own behavior. And a young man comes to the yeshiva who makes himself very, very modest. And he became known as an unav, a very humble person. And two of the older bachurim were in the yeshiva, who had been there for a number of years, working on themselves. And they made fun of this young guy. They said, look who thinks he's an unav. I mean, it's the opposite of what they should be doing. In any event, Hamevin Yavin. Have a wonderful day out there.
Thank you.
David.
Okay, who's gonna bench?
Thank
Well,
you.
you took away all my pleasures. How can I have a good day?
Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi.
Have a great day. Nathan, did you get your car back?
You too.
Yeah,
Good.
good shape. Thank you.
Okay. Yishem Baruch Yatovi Adolam.
I have something like that.